The last person you expect to steal from you is the one who offers to organize your paperwork. That's the lie I built my piece on. Not a big lie, not a dramatic one. A small, quiet lie. The kind that slips into your life and sits down like it belongs there. I was 70 years old when I finally admitted I needed help with my retirement forms. Not because I was careless. I'd never been careless with money. My entire working life had been built around keeping records, showing up early, filing things correctly, not cutting corners. But retirement paperwork isn't like the old days. It isn't neat envelopes and stamped forms anymore. It's portals, links that expire, PDF files that won't open unless you update something, signatures that have to be uploaded but not photographed, passwords that can't be reused but must be remembered. It's a maze designed for people who already grew up inside it. My stepson Ryan had. He was 32, worked in tech support for some mid-level company, always on his phone, always impatient with anything that didn't load instantly. "Just let me help you with this stuff," he'd said one afternoon while standing in my kitchen, leaning against the counter like he owned the place. "It's stupidly complicated. You shouldn't be dealing with this." He said it kindly enough, but there was something else underneath it, a faint irritation, like the world owed him efficiency. I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't like not understanding what I was signing. But then my wife, his mother, spoke from the living room. "He's just trying to help," she said. "You always make things harder than they need to be." That was her way. She hated friction. If someone offered to take a burden off her plate, she handed it over without asking what it cost. Ryan smiled at me. "I won't do anything without showing you first," he said. That sentence is what undid me. Because it sounds like respect. Over the next few weeks, he came by more often. Always when I was already tired. Always when there was a form waiting in my email. He'd pull up a chair beside me at the table, open his laptop, and start clicking through portals I didn't recognize. "Okay, this is just the annual verification," he'd say. "Here they're asking for updated contact info. This part is only about how they send your statements." He talked while he worked. Fast, confident, dismissive of anything that didn't matter. Every so often he'd turn the screen toward me. "Just sign here," he'd say. "This is all standard." And I'd sign. Not because I was careless, because I didn't want to seem helpless. I didn't see the forms he submitted after that. He said they were back-end processes, security updates, digital equivalents of mailing a copy of your ID. "You don't need to worry about the technical stuff," he said once when I asked what one particular form was for. "It's just internal routing." Internal routing. Those words meant nothing to me then, but they'd come back to me later, painfully clear. There was a moment, about 2 weeks into all this, when I noticed something small. My pension portal logged me out twice in the same afternoon. I didn't think much of it. Technology glitches. That's what Ryan always said when something didn't behave. When I mentioned it, he shrugged. "They updated their system," he said. "Happens all the time." Another time, I tried to log in and got an error message I'd never seen before. "Your session has expired. Please contact support if the problem persists." Ryan took the keyboard from me before I could read it twice. "Yeah, see, that's what I was talking about," he said quickly. "They're restructuring their security layers." Security layers. He had a phrase for everything. My wife loved it. "He knows this stuff," she said one night when I hesitated again. "Stop fighting him. You've got enough to worry about." I let it go. That's how it starts. Not with trust, but with fatigue. Then came the day he offered to streamline my retirement distribution. This wasn't casual. He arrived with a folder, printed documents, color tabs, notes in the margins like he'd been planning this for a while. "They're changing how they disperse funds next quarter," he said, spreading the pages out across the table. "If you don't update your information now, you'll get delays." "Delays, how long?" I asked. "Months, sometimes," he replied. "It's ridiculous. I've seen people get stuck in review loops." Review loops. He had a phrase for everything. "I don't want to mess this up," I said. "You won't," he replied. "That's why I'm here." He pointed to a signature line. "This one just authorizes the update," he said. "This one verifies your identity. This one lets them process the change." "What change?" I asked. He smiled. Thin. Brief, practiced. "Nothing meaningful," he said. "Just keeping your file current." That night, I went to bed believing my retirement was finally organized. I slept better than I had in weeks, and the worst part, so did he. The pension portal changed the week after Ryan streamlined everything. Not dramatically, not in a way that set off alarms, just small differences. Colors a shade lighter, buttons in slightly different places, a new banner at the top that said, "We've updated our systems to serve you better." That line should have meant nothing. Instead, it was the beginning of the longest month of my life. I logged in early one morning, coffee cooling beside me, expecting the usual dashboard. Account balance, payment history, next distribution date. I'd been checking more often since retirement planning became this shared project between me and my stepson. It felt responsible to stay informed. The page loaded slowly. Then it froze. I refreshed. This time it opened, but not to my normal overview. Instead, a pale blue screen appeared with a single message in the center. "Your retirement distribution has been processed." I smiled at first. Processed meant done. Done meant no delays. Ryan had been right. Then I saw the details. Payment status, completed. Distribution method, electronic transfer. Destination account, ending with 7413. I stared at the last 4 digits. I pulled out my old bank statements, flipping through the pages I still kept in a drawer, the habit of a man who trusted paper more than servers. My accounts ended in 1028. My savings ended in 5569. Nothing ended in 7413. I refreshed the page, thinking maybe it was a display error. It wasn't. The amount was correct, every cent I'd spent decades earning marked as sent. My hands began to sweat. I logged out, logged back in, checked every menu, every submenu. There was no option to view or change destination details anymore, only a grayed-out notice. Account updates are locked during active review periods. Active review periods. Another phrase that meant nothing until it meant everything. I didn't call Ryan immediately. I told myself it was probably a formatting glitch, that they'd masked the numbers for security reasons, that I was panicking over design choices. But panic doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from instinct noticing something the mind is still trying to deny. I called the pension authority instead. After 3 menu options and a recorded message about higher than normal call volumes, a woman answered. Her voice was calm, efficient, the kind of calm that makes you feel safe, until you realize safety depends on what she says next. "Can you verify your date of birth?" she asked. I did. "And the last 4 digits of your social security number?" I gave them. She typed for a long time. "I see your recent distribution," she said. "Yes," I replied quickly. "It shows a transfer to an account I don't recognize." There was a pause, not the kind of pause where someone is thinking, the kind where someone is confirming something they already see. "According to our records," she said, "you submitted a change of deposit form 2 weeks ago." My stomach dropped. "I didn't submit any such thing," I said. "You updated the receiving account details," she continued, not unkindly. "It was approved after identity verification. I never changed my deposit account," I said, my voice suddenly too loud in my own ears. She hesitated. "Sir, the system shows the form was submitted digitally using your credentials." I closed my eyes. "My credentials were used," I said carefully. "That doesn't mean I authorized it." She didn't argue. "That may be the case," she said, "but we'll need to initiate a trace request." "What does that involve?" I asked. "It means we locate where the funds were sent," she replied. "We review the submission metadata, and we confirm whether the transaction was legitimate. And if it wasn't," I asked. Her pause this time was longer. "Then the appropriate steps will follow," she said. For a long time I sat there staring at my kitchen wall, trying to piece together how forms I hadn't seen could move money I hadn't approved. Then I thought about Ryan's laptop, the way he'd angled it away from me, the way he'd taken the keyboard before I could read error messages, the way he'd said things like internal routing and security layers. I called him. It went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I called my wife instead. "Ryan helped you with the pension paperwork, right?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, distracted. "He said everything went through fine. Did you see the forms?" I asked. "Why would I?" she said lightly. "You're always worrying too much." I hung up without explaining, because the truth was starting to feel too heavy to say out loud. The trace request confirmation email arrived that afternoon. Subject: distribution review initiated. Body: this process may take 7 to 14 business days. Please refrain from making further changes during this time. I wasn't worried about making changes. I was worried about the number 7413. That evening, Ryan finally called back. "What's up?" he said, cheerful as ever. "My pension was transferred today," I said. "Great," he replied. "See, I told you." "To an account I don't recognize," I interrupted. Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. "What account did it go to?" he asked finally. I told him. There was a small sound on the line. A breath, maybe. Or a shift of weight. "That's probably the clearing account," he said. "They don't show full numbers anymore." "Then why don't my old accounts show like that?" I asked. Another pause. "They've updated their display logic," he replied. "It's not uniform across systems." Display logic. I could almost see him sitting there, spinning words like thread. "I filed a trace request," I said. He inhaled sharply. "You did what?" he snapped. "I filed a trace," I repeated. "They're reviewing the submission metadata." The word metadata changed the room between us. "You didn't need to do that," he said quickly. "Now it's going to slow everything down." "It's already gone," I replied. "I'm allowed to know where." His voice dropped. "Look," he said, "this is just going to complicate things." The same word he'd used every time I asked a question. "What exactly did you submit?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Ryan," I said, "what forms did you send?" "I was trying to help you," he replied. That wasn't an answer. I hung up. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark replaying every moment he'd sat at my table, every place I'd trusted his fluency over my instincts. By morning the pension authority emailed again. Subject: additional verification required. This time, the message included a line that froze my blood. Our system indicates the destination account is associated with an individual not listed on your retirement file. An individual not listed on your retirement file. I forwarded the email to my attorney without comment. Then I called the pension authority back. When the same woman answered, I didn't pretend anymore. "I believe my stepson redirected my pension without my knowledge," I said. She didn't sound shocked. She sounded prepared. The trace request didn't move loudly. There were no flashing alerts or emergency phone calls. Just an email at 9 a.m. with a subject line so bland it felt almost insulting. Distribution review. Documentation pending. Inside were 6 bullet points. Not explanations, requests. They wanted copies of my identification. They wanted confirmation of my original bank account. They wanted to know whether I had authorized any third party to manage my pension account. I stared at that last question for a long time. Because authorization is a tricky thing. It doesn't always come in writing. Sometimes it comes in proximity. Sometimes it comes in the way you slide your chair back and let someone else sit in front of your screen. I checked no. By noon I was on the phone with a man who introduced himself as a compliance officer. His voice was neutral in the way only people trained to hold distance can manage. "We've located the destination account," he said. "We're now reviewing the submission path." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we're tracing how the change of deposit form entered our system," he replied. "Every form carries metadata, timestamps, device identifiers, and routing information. Can you tell me whose account it went to?" I asked. "We can't disclose that yet," he said, "but I can tell you it does not belong to you." My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "I never authorized a change," I said. "We understand," he replied. "That's why we're reviewing the authentication sequence." Authentication sequence. He explained it carefully. To update deposit information, someone must log in using verified credentials, upload supporting documentation, submit a scanned signature, and confirm through a secondary channel. In your case, he continued, all those steps were completed successfully. "That's impossible," I said. He paused. "It would be impossible," he corrected, "if no one else had access to your environment." Environment. My kitchen. My table. Ryan's laptop. "I want to know when this was submitted," I said. 2 weeks ago," he replied, "from a residential IP address, not a corporate network." I didn't ask where. That evening, I pulled every scrap of paper Ryan had left behind. Notes, printed forms, scribbled reminders. I spread them across the table, searching for something that didn't belong. There it was, a folded page at the bottom of the stack, an instruction sheet from the pension authority. Step 4. Enter new receiving account details. He hadn't highlighted that line. He'd circled it. The next morning, my attorney called. "They've given me preliminary metadata," he said. "And," I asked, They're consistent, he replied. Same device fingerprint across all submission points, same IP range, same upload sequence. What does that tell you? I asked. That whoever did this didn't improvise, he said. They followed the workflow exactly. Followed the workflow. This wasn't a mistake, it was a process. That afternoon, the compliance officer called again. We've reviewed the scanned signature, he said. It matches the specimen on file closely enough to pass automated verification. I never scanned my signature, I replied. Someone did, he said, from a home printer scanner combination. The compression artifacts are consistent. Compression artifacts. I was learning a new language. One built not on trust but on data. Was the form submitted from my computer? I asked. No, he said. It was submitted from a laptop not previously associated with your account. My throat tightened. So someone logged into my account from a new device, I said, uploaded a scanned version of my signature, changed my deposit details and confirmed the transfer. Yes, he replied. And you didn't flag that? I asked. It passed identity verification, he said, which means your credentials were used. I closed my eyes. They also provided a secondary confirmation, he added, which is why the transaction wasn't held. Secondary confirmation. What confirmation? I asked. There was a response to the automated verification email, he said. I opened my inbox immediately, scrolling back 2 weeks. There it was. Subject, confirm your pension update. Status, opened. I never remembered opening it, but my email client said otherwise. They clicked the link, the officer continued, from the same IP range. The room felt smaller. So you're saying, I said slowly, that whoever did this had access to my email too? Yes, he replied. That's when the story changed. Because pension fraud is one thing. Email compromise is another. It meant Ryan hadn't just touched my paperwork. He'd touched my identity. I drove to his apartment that night. He didn't invite me in. He stood in the doorway, blocking the view behind him. They're tracing everything, I said. They shouldn't be, he replied quickly. This is being blown out of proportion. They know where the forms came from, I said. They know the device. They know the IP. His jaw tightened. You don't understand how these systems work, he said. No, I replied. But they do. He tried to smile. You're overreacting, he said. This will get sorted out. I looked him in the eye. Did you submit those forms? I asked. There was a long pause. Then he said something that changed everything. I did what I had to. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just said, you moved my pension. He didn't deny it. You weren't using it yet, he replied. It was just sitting there. Just sitting there. I needed capital, he continued. And I knew you wouldn't say yes if I asked. There it was. Not confusion. Not miscommunication. Intention. They're going to see this as fraud, I said. He shrugged. They won't prove it, he replied. I had access. You signed things. I thought of the words environment and authentication sequence. You didn't just use access, I said. You used structure. He scoffed. You always make things dramatic, he said. I turned and walked away without another word, because I knew something he didn't yet. The forms didn't care about our relationship. The system didn't care about intent. It only cared about evidence. And the evidence was already speaking. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. Not by email. Not by phone. By post. A plain white envelope with the Pension Authority's logo in the corner. The kind of envelope people throw away without opening. I didn't. I slid it carefully and laid the pages out on the table as if they were evidence from a crime scene. Subject, unauthorized distribution review. Status update. The wording was colder now. No longer documentation pending. No longer verification required. Now it said, we are formally investigating irregularities associated with the recent change of deposit and distribution activity on your account. Irregularities. Plural. The letter listed what they had already established that the change of deposit form was submitted digitally from a device not previously associated with my profile. The submission originated from a residential IP address not linked to any known provider in their system. The confirmation email was opened and actioned from the same IP within 3 minutes of delivery, and the destination account holder was not listed as an authorized recipient or beneficiary. At the bottom, a single line, printed in bold. You may be contacted by external authorities as part of this process. External authorities. The words felt unreal, like something that belonged in a courtroom, not at my kitchen table. I called the number at the bottom of the letter. This time I didn't get the helpful woman. I got transferred twice, and eventually landed with a man who introduced himself only by last name. "We've moved this into a multi-agency review," he said. "That means we coordinate with your bank, our compliance department, and, if necessary, law enforcement." "If necessary?" I asked. He paused. "In cases involving unauthorized fund redirection and identity misuse," he said, "it is usually necessary." That night I told my wife everything. Not in anger, not in accusation, just facts. She listened with her arms folded, her jaw tightening with every detail. "He wouldn't do that," she said when I finished. "He already admitted it," I replied. She shook her head slowly. "He said he was trying to protect you," she whispered. I stared at her. "From what?" I asked. She had no answer. 2 days later, my bank called. Not customer service, risk management. They confirmed what the pension authority had already discovered. The destination account was held under Ryan's name, at a separate institution. They couldn't tell me the balance, but they could tell me this. He attempted to move the funds again. "After the trace was filed?" I asked. "Yes," the representative replied, "from a different device." That detail chilled me more than the theft itself, because it meant he wasn't retreating. He was adjusting. "They've locked the receiving account," she continued. "No further movement is possible at this time. Is the money recoverable?" I asked. She hesitated. "That depends on the investigation," which is a polite way of saying not until someone is held responsible. The next call came from a detective, not uniformed, not confrontational, quiet. "We're following up on a report of unauthorized pension redirection," he said. "Can you confirm your stepson's full name and address?" I gave it. "And you did not authorize him to change your deposit information?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Did he have access to your login credentials?" he continued. "Yes," I said. "And your email?" he asked. "Yes," I repeated. He exhaled slowly. "That doesn't change the nature of the offense," he said, "but it does shape the case." 2 days later, my wife's phone rang. She answered it on speaker without thinking. "Mrs. Carter?" the voice asked. "This is Detective Hale." Her face drained of color. "We need to speak with your son regarding an active investigation," he continued. "Ryan didn't come to dinner that night. He didn't call, he didn't text, but he did something else. He tried to log back into my pension portal. At 11:43 p.m. I received a security alert. Unauthorized login attempt detected. Account access temporarily suspended. By morning I had another letter. This one bore the emblem of the state. Notice of pending criminal inquiry. It listed the charge under review. Financial exploitation through deceptive electronic means. Not fraud. Not yet. Exploitation. I was in the kitchen when the knock came. 2 officers stood on the porch, calm, measured, carrying nothing but a folder. They didn't ask to come in. They asked for Ryan. "He doesn't live here," my wife said automatically. They exchanged a glance. "We're aware," one replied, "but we need to confirm contact information." When they left, she sank into a chair like her bones had suddenly gone soft. "He said he was helping," she whispered. I didn't respond, because I'd learned something over the past month. People don't steal loudly. They steal administratively, through checkboxes, credentials, and moments when no one is watching closely. And now, every box Ryan had checked was lining up in a file that no longer belonged to us. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. Not by email. Not by phone. By post. A plain white envelope with the pension authority's logo in the corner. The kind of envelope people throw away without opening. I didn't. I slid it carefully and laid the pages out on the table as if they were evidence from a crime scene. Subject: Unauthorized Distribution Review. Status Update. The wording was colder now. No longer documentation pending. No longer verification required. Now it said, "We are formally investigating irregularities associated with the recent change of deposit and distribution activity on your account." Irregularities. Plural. The letter listed what they had already established, that the change of deposit form was submitted digitally from a device not previously associated with my profile. The submission originated from a residential IP address not linked to any known provider in their system. The confirmation email was opened and actioned from the same IP within 3 minutes of delivery. and the destination account holder was not listed as an authorized recipient or beneficiary. At the bottom, a single line, printed in bold. You may be contacted by external authorities as part of this process. External authorities. The words felt unreal, like something that belonged in a courtroom, not at my kitchen table. I called the number at the bottom of the letter. This time I didn't get the helpful woman. I got transferred twice, and eventually landed with a man who introduced himself only by last name. "We've moved this into a multi-agency review," he said. "That means we coordinate with your bank, our compliance department, and, if necessary, law enforcement." "If necessary?" I asked. He paused. "In cases involving unauthorized fund redirection and identity misuse," he said, "it is usually necessary." That night I told my wife everything. Not in anger, not in accusation, just facts. She listened with her arms folded, her jaw tightening with every detail. "He wouldn't do that," she said when I finished. "He already admitted it," I replied. She shook her head slowly. "He said he was trying to protect you," she whispered. I stared at her. "From what?" I asked. She had no answer. 2 days later, my bank called. Not customer service, risk management. They confirmed what the pension authority had already discovered. The destination account was held under Ryan's name, at a separate institution. They couldn't tell me the balance, but they could tell me this. He attempted to move the funds again. "After the trace was filed?" I asked. "Yes," the representative replied, "from a different device." That detail chilled me more than the theft itself, because it meant he wasn't retreating. He was adjusting. "They've locked the receiving account," she continued. "No further movement is possible at this time. Is the money recoverable?" I asked. She hesitated. "That depends on the investigation," which is a polite way of saying not until someone is held responsible. The next call came from a detective, not uniformed, not confrontational, quiet. "We're following up on a report of unauthorized pension redirection," he said. "Can you confirm your stepson's full name and address?" I gave it. "And you did not authorize him to change your deposit information?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Did he have access to your login credentials?" he continued. "Yes," I said. "And your email?" he asked. "Yes," I repeated. He exhaled slowly. "That doesn't change the nature of the offense," he said, "but it does shape the case." 2 days later, my wife's phone rang. She answered it on speaker without thinking. "Mrs. Carter?" the voice asked. "This is Detective Hale." Her face drained of color. "We need to speak with your son regarding an active investigation," he continued. "Ryan didn't come to dinner that night. He didn't call, he didn't text, but he did something else. He tried to log back into my pension portal. At 11:43 p.m. I received a security alert. Unauthorized login attempt detected. Account access temporarily suspended. By morning I had another letter. This one bore the emblem of the state. Notice of pending criminal inquiry. It listed the charge under review. Financial exploitation through deceptive electronic means. Not fraud. Not yet. Exploitation. I was in the kitchen when the knock came. 2 officers stood on the porch, calm, measured, carrying nothing but a folder. They didn't ask to come in. They asked for Ryan. "He doesn't live here," my wife said automatically. They exchanged a glance. "We're aware," one replied, "but we need to confirm contact information." When they left, she sank into a chair like her bones had suddenly gone soft. "He said he was helping," she whispered. I didn't respond, because I'd learned something over the past month. People don't steal loudly. They steal administratively, through checkboxes, credentials, and moments when no one is watching closely. And now, every box Ryan had checked was lining up in a file that no longer belonged to us. The first thing Ryan lost wasn't the money. It was access. He called me just after noon, the day his account was frozen. I didn't recognize the number at first. It was a burner phone, one of those prepaid things people buy when they don't want calls traced. "They locked me out of everything," he said without greeting. His voice was sharp with something that sounded like disbelief rather than fear. "I can't get into my banking app. I can't even reset my passwords." I pictured him sitting somewhere unfamiliar, staring at a screen that kept returning the same neutral error message no matter how many times he typed. "Account access restricted. Please contact support." "I told you this wasn't going to end quietly," I said. "You didn't have to go to the police," he snapped. "I didn't," I replied. "The system did." That answer didn't satisfy him. "They're treating me like I'm dangerous," he said. like I'm some kind of criminal. You moved money that wasn't yours, I replied. That tends to have consequences. There was a long silence on the line. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. They came to my apartment this morning, he said. 2 of them. They didn't have handcuffs, but they didn't ask permission either. What did they want? I asked. My laptop, he said. My phone. My external drives. Anything that could store credentials. The image was almost surreal. Ryan, who had once smirked at my paper files and old habits, now watching uniformed officers catalog his digital life like evidence in a lab. They said it was just for review, he continued, that I'd get it back. That depends on what they find, I said. He exhaled sharply. They also froze the account the pension was sent to, he said. I can't touch it. They flagged it as disputed funds. Disputed. Not stolen. Not recovered. Disputed. That's the stage where everything hangs in limbo, where money exists but belongs to no one. They said they need to verify intent, he added. They asked me why I didn't tell you. Why didn't you? I asked. He didn't answer. They also asked about the forms, he said after a pause, about the change of deposit authorization. And, I asked. They showed me a copy, he replied, with your signature. I closed my eyes. Did it look real? I asked. Too real, he said quietly. That's the problem. The officers had pulled metadata from the scanned document. Creation time, device ID, compression profile. They'd laid it out in front of him, not accusing, not explaining, just asking him to tell the story that matched the data. He couldn't. I didn't think it would turn into this, he said. I thought it would be a private thing. Private. He still didn't understand what he'd done. 2 days later, the pension authority called again. This time, they didn't want to talk about the trace. They wanted to talk about restoration. We've recovered the funds, the representative said. They're currently in a secured holding account. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. What happens now? I asked. We wait for clearance from the investigation, she replied. Then we return the money to your original deposit account. And Ryan? I asked. She paused. That will be handled separately. Handled separately. Another phrase that means you won't like the ending. That afternoon, my wife told me Ryan had come by while I was out. He wanted to explain, she said. What did he say? I asked. She shook her head. That you misunderstood him, she replied. That he was just borrowing it. Borrowing implies intention to return. He never said that before. He cried, she added quietly. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because crying after getting caught isn't remorse. It's reaction. The following week, the detective called again. We've completed the preliminary forensic review, he said. We'd like to schedule a formal interview with your stepson. I imagined Ryan sitting in another small room, answering the same questions again, only this time with the weight of seized devices behind every word. Is this going to lead to charges? I asked. There's a strong likelihood, he replied, especially given the attempts to access the account after the trace was initiated. Attempts, plural. That was the detail that broke any lingering illusion of accident. When I relayed that to my wife, she finally went silent. Not defensive, not argumentative, just tired. He always said he was smarter than the system, she murmured. And the system listened, I replied. The last time Ryan called before the interview, his voice was barely there. They're saying I could be charged, he said. Not just fined. You moved retirement funds without authorization, I replied. That's not a paperwork error. I didn't think it counted, he whispered. I closed my eyes. It always counts, I said. Especially when the person you're stealing from trusted you. He hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I found the folder he'd left behind weeks earlier, the one with color tabs and neat labels. I opened it for the first time since everything began. Every section was marked. Every line had been planned. This wasn't impulse. It was design, and design leaves trails. The interview wasn't scheduled in a police station. That's what surprised me when the detective called. It'll take place at the Financial Crimes Unit, he said. Conference room. Neutral setting. Neutral. There is nothing neutral about a room where every word you say is recorded, transcribed, compared to data you haven't seen. Ryan didn't want me there. He said that in a text that arrived the night before. I need to handle this myself. That was new, not confidence, isolation. When he finally went in, I didn't hear from him for 5 hours. Not a call, not a message, just silence heavy enough to press against the walls of my house. When he did call, it was from a landline. "They're not letting me leave yet," he said quietly. "They say they need clarification. Clarification is what happens when answers don't match records." "They showed me everything," he continued. "The IP logs, the submission trail, the email confirmations." I closed my eyes. "They know the exact minute I uploaded your signature," he said. "And," I asked. "They asked me how I had it," he replied. I waited. "I told them you gave it to me," he said. "Did you?" I asked. Silence. "They played the call where you said you didn't authorize anything," he continued. "Then they showed me the scanned form again. I could almost see him sitting there, watching his own handwriting reduced to a pattern of pixels. They asked me why the scan came from my printer," he said, "why the file was created on my laptop, why the confirmation email was opened from my IP." Another pause. "They asked me why I tried to log in again after the trace was filed. That detail landed like a stone." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That I was trying to fix it," he replied. "And?" I asked. "They said fixing it would have meant telling you," he whispered. "That's the moment everything changes. When people stop letting you define your own story." The detective called me later that evening. "Your stepson has been advised to retain legal counsel," he said. "We're preparing a charging recommendation." "Fraud?" I asked. "Multiple counts," he replied, "including exploitation through deceptive electronic submission." That phrase sounded clinical. It wasn't. It meant they no longer believed his version of help. Ryan called again that night, his voice hoarse. "They say I could lose my job over this," he said, "but my employer might be notified." "They will be," I replied. He laughed weakly. "I was only trying to get ahead," he said. "Everyone does it." "No," I replied. "Everyone doesn't steal from family." He didn't respond. "They asked me something I didn't expect," he said after a moment. "What?" I asked. "They asked if I felt entitled to your money," he replied. "Entitled? That word is a mirror people don't like looking into." "What did you say?" I asked. "I said no," he whispered. "And did they believe you?" I asked. "I don't think so," he replied, "because belief doesn't come from tone. It comes from patterns." The next day, the formal notice arrived, not in the mail, by courier, state of redacted. Notice of intent to prosecute. The words blurred as I read them. Unauthorized financial redirection, electronic misrepresentation, exploitation of trust relationship. Trust relationship. That was the part that hurt, because the law had found a name for what I hadn't wanted to admit. Ryan showed up at my door that evening. Not defiant, not clever, small. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said, standing on the porch like a stranger. I didn't invite him in. "They keep asking me why I thought I could do it," he said, "and I don't have a good answer." I studied his face. The same face that had once leaned over my table, telling me everything was standard. "You didn't think you could do it," I replied. "You thought you wouldn't be stopped." He flinched. "That's not the same thing," I continued. "One is ambition. The other is entitlement." His eyes filled. "I just wanted it for myself," he whispered. There it was. Not help. Not confusion. Desire. "I wanted what you had," he said, "and I didn't think you'd miss it right away." I closed my eyes. "That's not how pensions work," I said. "They're not accounts. They're lives." He nodded, tears finally slipping free. "They said the paper trail is airtight," he whispered. "They said it's not about whether you forgive me." I didn't respond. "They said the system doesn't forget," he added. He was right. Systems don't forgive. They remember. The charge sheet didn't come with drama. It came as a PDF attachment with a fine line that looked like any other administrative document. State v. Ryan Carter, initial filing, .pdf. That was how his name first left the family and entered the system. I opened it slowly, as if speed might change what was written inside. Unauthorized redirection of retirement funds, electronic misrepresentation, exploitation of trust relationship, attempted concealment following detection. There were no adjectives, no emotion, just a list of actions that, when laid end to end, no longer looked like a mistake, they looked like a plan. My wife didn't read it at first. She couldn't. She folded the letter the detective had mailed to her and placed it on the counter as if it might contaminate the room if opened too wide. "They're calling him a criminal," she said quietly. No, I replied, they're describing his behavior. The difference mattered. 2 days later, he was formally charged. Not arrested in a loud scene, not marched out of anywhere. He was instructed to appear. And when someone is instructed to appear, it means the system has already decided they will. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. No echoing halls, no grand staircases, just beige walls, worn carpet, and a quiet waiting area that smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. Ryan sat 3 rows ahead of me. He didn't turn around, not because he was angry, because he didn't know what face to wear anymore. When his name was called, he stood too quickly, knocking his chair back before catching it and pushing it under the bench with unnecessary care. The clerk read the charges in a tone so even it was almost kind. Each line felt heavier than the last. He didn't look at me when he entered his plea. Not guilty, not because he believed it, but because the word is reflex when you're not ready to own what you've done. Outside, reporters didn't wait. There were no cameras. Just one local journalist with a notepad who asked my wife if she wanted to comment. She shook her head without speaking. That was the moment she finally stopped trying to protect him. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. At home that evening, my phone rang again. It was his lawyer. "Your testimony will likely be required," she said, specifically regarding authorization and access. "Will he try to say I approved it?" I asked. She paused. "He's already implied confusion," she said, "which is why clarity will matter." Clarity. The word hung between us like a warning. That night, Ryan came over without telling us. He stood in the doorway until I noticed him. He didn't step inside. "I didn't think they'd file so fast," he said. "That's what happens when the evidence is ready," I replied. "They're saying I manipulated you," he whispered. I met his eyes. "You did." He flinched. "I was going to give it back," he said. "That's not what makes something theft," I replied. "It's not the return, it's the taking." His shoulders sagged. "They're telling me the sentencing guidelines are serious," he murmured. "That this isn't just a fine." "No," I said. "It isn't." My wife watched from the hallway. She didn't speak. She just looked at him the way mothers look at sons when something inside them finally breaks. "I don't belong anywhere now," he said. "That's not true," I replied. "You belong exactly where your choices put you." He left without saying goodbye. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks of whispered conversations, of relatives who stopped calling, of neighbors who suddenly pretended not to see us. And through it all, the pension authority restored my funds. Quietly, without ceremony. The money returned with a sterile notification email. Distribution successfully re-established to original account. No apology, no acknowledgement, just closure. But closure is not the same as peace. Ryan texted me once during that stretch. "I never thought paperwork could ruin a life." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. The courthouse felt different on the day of the verdict. Not louder, not quieter. Heavier, not with tension, with inevitability. Ryan sat at the defense table with his lawyer beside him, wearing a jacket he'd never owned before all of this. The kind people buy when they want to look like someone who doesn't need second chances. He didn't look at me when I entered. Not because he was angry, because looking at me would have meant facing the moment that had started it all. The afternoon he leaned over my kitchen table and said he was just trying to help. The prosecutor didn't speak in accusations. She spoke in timestamps. She walked the judge through the evidence as if it were a map. The login from an unrecognized device. The scanned signature created from a printer registered to Ryan's apartment. The confirmation email opened from the same IP address within 3 minutes. The destination account opened less than a week prior, and the second login attempt after the trace was filed. No emotion, no anger, just structure. Then she used a phrase that cut through the room like glass. "This wasn't desperation," she said. "It was entitlement with a workflow." Ryan flinched. His lawyer argued mitigation, youth, pressure, a difficult economy. But none of those explained the planning. And planning was the one thing nobody could talk around anymore. When the judge finally spoke, he didn't look at Ryan at first. He looked at the file. "I don't believe you set out to destroy a family," he said calmly. "But you did choose to exploit access that was never meant to be used this way." Ryan stared at the floor. "You didn't stumble into this," the judge continued. "You constructed it. Then he delivered the sentence. Not dramatic, not crushing, measured. Probation, mandatory restitution, a permanent mark on his financial record, court-ordered counseling for financial exploitation behavior. Not prison, but not freedom either. A life reshaped by one decision that had been quietly, carefully, entirely his. Outside the courtroom, my wife cried for the first time since the investigation began. Not loudly, not in my arms, just standing beside the courthouse steps, tears sliding down as if they'd finally been given permission to exist. "I don't recognize him anymore," she whispered. I didn't answer, because sometimes the truth isn't something you say, it's something you allow. Ryan didn't approach us afterward. He left with his lawyer, walking fast, shoulders hunched, phone already in his hand. Not calling anyone, just gripping it like it was the last thing that still obeyed him. The money was already back in my account. It had been there for weeks, but it felt different now. Not like relief, like ownership reclaimed. That night, I logged into my pension portal for the first time since everything ended. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The destination account was correct. The permissions were reset. Every access log now displayed only one device, mine. I closed the laptop slowly. Not with satisfaction, with something deeper. I hadn't beaten my stepson. I hadn't humiliated him. I had simply refused to pretend that trust and theft can coexist. A month later, he sent me a letter. Not a text, not a call. A letter. He wrote it by hand. The kind of detail that only happens when someone finally understands the weight of records. He didn't apologize. Not really. He explained. He wrote about wanting something that wasn't his, about believing speed could replace permission, about how systems don't negotiate. At the end, there was one sentence that mattered. I thought paperwork was invisible. I didn't realize it was the only thing that never forgets. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where I now keep my bank statements. Not to punish him, to remember. Because this story wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. The clarity that arrives when you stop trying to protect behavior that harms you. The clarity that comes when you finally see that help without boundaries is just theft with better branding. My retirement is quiet again. My house is quieter. And that's the point, because peace doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from drawing lines so cleanly that nothing crosses them again. If this story moved you, then you already understand why I tell them. Not to relive the pain, but to leave a record. Because the paper trail never sleeps, and neither should your instincts.